Please welcome to the show. We got former multi-million pound Caribbean marijuana smuggler, author, father, and grandfather, Saltwater Cowboy, Tim McBride. Welcome to the show.
Thomas, great to be here, man. I've been watching you for a while. It's so very cool. Finally, you got the book,
Yeah.
hooked up. Hopefully we'll have it, through Amazon alone, down under here shortly. But like yourself, you get it through just, go to a local bookstore and they'll get it for you somehow, But thank you so much for, having me on, man. So this is a pleasure. I've got I've got friends. I've got got a lot of friends down under and fans. I did a Viceland video some years ago that took off rather well. I wound up getting 12 million followers out, up from down under, and that was pretty cool to see.
Yeah, that's
But,
awesome. Yeah, I love watching your videos online too.
yeah, everyone's different. That's why, I love doing, like guys like yourself. It doesn't matter, man. I mean, I don't give a shit. I'll come on. I'm not reading from a script or a book or anything. It's going right from here, right to you. And that's what I love about it. It's never the same way twice.
Yeah.
And it's always fun that way.
Nah, that's brilliant, man. I guess we should start from the start. Where exactly are you from? Where were you born? And yeah, leading up to when
Oh,
you first moved to that place.
okay. Yeah. Let's, we get that in and out of the way real quick. I was born in North Carolina, just north of where I am right now on the East Coast of the United States. My father was in the um, Army. He was in the 82nd Airborne paratrooper. And I grew up an Army brat, and most of my life in North Carolina, and my family was, originally from Ohio, was where my family roots were from. We were just in North Carolina, obviously, because my father was there, was in the airborne, and that's where my two brothers and I were born. From there, we moved to the Midwest, following my father and his job prospects. After getting out of the Army, and he was a salesman. So we set ourselves up between Chicago and Milwaukee, the two biggest cities that he was working out of at the time. And I had the opportunity at that time for 4 years. I did my 4 years of high school, in southern Wisconsin, a little town called Delavan, next to a rather touristy sort of a town called Lake Geneva,
Yeah.
whereby all the people, all the kids, and all the families, the suburbanites and Chicagoites would come, and spend the weekends under the holidays, at their little cottages on the lake and stuff. But that being said, it was more of a time when, the age to drink in Illinois, which was the state, 5 miles. We were 5 miles away from the state line. We were only 45 minutes from Chicago. Almost everybody I knew was from Chicago, because the drinking age was 21. There was only 18 in Wisconsin. Every
Wow.
weekend they're all by the lake. We're at somebody's house that the parents own a summer cottage in the wintertime, packed in there partying and having a great time. So a lot of my friends were, from there. So I did 4 cool years of, high school and growing up, like that. Did a little bit of stint out west in LA for an entertainer during the day called Sammy Davis Jr., a member of the Rat Pack with Dean
Yeah, the
Martin.
Rat Pack.
Yeah, yeah, and I worked with those guys, especially Sammy. I was doing personal videotaping at that time for him. He wanted to watch television, but he didn't want to watch the commercials and all this shit. So my job was, quite literally, every week take him a television guide, and he would mark in the guide what shit he wanted to watch page by page, and I would have to sit in my apartment that was paid by him. My salary was paid by him, rent, and I mean everything. I had a car, rent a car, gasoline. I didn't pay for anything. Plus, he gave me a salary, which I wasn't spending. I was just throwing it in the bank, man. Because, and my apartment had, different formats of video recording at that time. And there was only really two. There was the 3/4 inch giant fucking Betamax things, they call them. And VHS was just starting to come out, just becoming popular. This is like in 78, 77, 78-ish, around in there. And Richard Wayman, Sammy's financial advisor, who I got hooked up with, staying in the apartment at the same time, and he traveled a lot. So him and my cousin Joey, who got me the job, drove Sammy's tour bus for him. That's how I got hooked up and all that crap. But long story short, I got tired of that Hollywood crap. The bubble burst for me, man. Once I figured out what all the vaccine shit was like, and how it really was. Television and movies just weren't the same for me anymore.
Wow.
All the mystique and all that,
Yep.
what's left to your imagination shit just went gone, because
Yeah.
that's not real.
Yep.
They're filming MASH, and where are they filming it? Not in South Korea, dude. They're filming it just outside the LA in the hills. And then that was just the magic of Hollywood that I was introduced to. Fuck that. So I went back to Wisconsin and I got my Mustang, and I was back there a day, and my buddy who I grew up next door to on the lake, through high school.
That Clark?
He's yeah, Mark. Clark in the book, but his real name is Mark.
Yeah.
And I can say his real name and he doesn't mind it, but
Yeah.
when I was writing the book, several of the names I had changed, but I certainly didn't have to, because anyone that had been implicated in any of these federal operations or anything to do with smuggling during that time, I could say their name legally and not worry about any repercussion. But if there were persons who were involved that had not been implicated, and there were a lot, there was a lot of people involved in shit that people didn't even know about.
Wow.
Like Captain Willie in the book.
Wow.
His name is actually, or Captain Red. Actually,
Yep.
they wouldn't even usually let me use Willie because his real name's Billy.
Wow.
And I was going to call him Captain Willie, and they said, no, that's a little too close to Billy. And but he didn't get implicated because he backed out. He went into the background prior to all the other comings, and goings on and stuff. So, and the statute of limitations is only 2 years. So he wound up, getting away, scot free, which was good for him. God bless his ass. But when I went to write this, he said, yeah, go ahead, use my name. I don't care. But it had been too late at that time, by that time. And I said, look, out of respect for you and Mark and the other guys whose names I've changed, and I didn't have to. I did out of respect for you, but I wanted to get your permission to do so, prior to doing something like this, particularly, saying your name all over the fucking world, for Christ's sake. Everybody's going to hear your name, and Billy's going to me, I don't give a shit, tell him my name, like that, but it was already too late. But and I wound up, Mark called me one day after I got back from LA, and I was, up on the lake fucking around, and he says, dude, I'm moving to Florida tomorrow. He says, I've got a job lined up working on what they call a stone crab boat, pulling stone crab traps, and his sister Nancy, who was, just a dear friend, just as a dear friend as he was to me, we were next door neighbors, for crying out loud. But her husband, she was married to one of the guys who was a native of the area, and he and her were running as managers, operating the only fish house on Chokoloskee Island at that time. All the other fish houses were on the next island over, which was Everglades. We were connected by a causeway. Wow. There were like 4 or 5 other fish houses that other crab boats and whatnot caught and brought their catch to, But the only one on Chokoloskee Island itself, and I'll pass along some pictures for you, was the one that her and her brother ran, or her and her husband ran. And Mark being her brother, her husband being a native, they knew where we came from and they knew all about us, so there wasn't like, because people are going to ask this question, how does a guy from the Midwest, all of a sudden show up down there and start, hauling pots? Well, it didn't happen like that. These people just don't, if you come into town, this is, even today, that the 2 islands together, Everglades City and Chokoloskee, Everglades City itself, the population is still under 500 people.
Wow.
Fuck, there's only so much land there,
Yeah.
You can only get so many people on, 129 acres was Chokoloskee Island. That's all it is. Wow. And Everglades City's maybe 3 times that. So, you're only going to they're not making any more land, dude. You're not going to get any more fuckers on there. So that's why I was, when somebody come into town, everybody knows you're there, man. You're not getting away with any kind of shit, Plus, I didn't go down there, with any aspirations of becoming what I did or getting involved in what I got involved in, and as we'll get to. But you hear the stories, you hear the rumors, and that's what they all are, really. They're ghost stories, until you actually become one of those ghosts. And so as it goes, Mark's working on this boat. You know, it's coming toward the end of season, which is right about now. May 15th is the end of stone crab season. Then you have the summer off,
Yeah.
and then the October 15th in the fall, you begin to throw all your traps back in the water and get them set to be pulled. Now I know, and I'm not certain, but are y'all familiar with a show called Deadliest Catch?
Yeah. Yeah.
Shows down under. They show that down there.
Yeah, we
Well,
got that on TV.
okay, well, what we do is actually very quite similar to what they are doing.
Yeah.
Only they're doing it on a massive scale with regards to when I say massive, their traps are 1,000 pounds a piece,
Wow.
and they're using 3/4 inch rope,
Yep.
you know, and they're in 600, 700, 800 feet of water, you know,
Yeah.
at times pulling these one. That's why they're only pulling 60 traps in a day. Well, our boat, our one boat, our 51-foot marine management, and I'll send a picture along too as well of the boat with myself and Mark on the back of it.
Yep.
Our traps were only about 55 pounds ish, somewhere like that. They were maybe, I don't know, 25 inches wide by 28 inches deep by maybe 24 inches high. And they had just wooden, you know, rubber. We used tires that we cut up and used as for hinges, as rubber hinges to open the lids. Turn the wooden handle like this and just flop the lid open, take the crab out, rebait it, and shut it. Now there's a piece of polyvinyl chloride PVC pipe that's about 4 inches wide and about that long. That's nailed inside the top of that lid, so when the crabs slide in, they can't get back out.
Yeah.
So, and the reason they weigh as much as they do, being as small as they are, is because the bottom 6 to 7 inches of that trap is solid concrete.
Wow.
So when you shove that fucking thing back off the edge of the boat, you know,
Yeah.
and sometimes we're pulling in 30 feet of water. Sometimes we're pulling in, you know, 8 feet of water on shore. And sometimes we've got traps offshore that are in as much as 60 feet of water. So you've got to have 80 plus feet of line on them because of the tide and the way the pulls, you know, the tide will pull your buoys under, you know, or whatever. But that's only because our one boat had 6,000 traps.
Whoa.
We were pulling 600 of these fucking things a day, one right after the other. And we'd go 300 traps one direction,
Yep.
excuse me, going away from where we began. And you'd start it. And this is how it was imparted to me. Let me get this part of it out of the way. You wake up at like 3 and get on the boat at 3:30 in the morning or so, because it takes so long to get to sometimes to where we need to be. The boat's not fast. These boats aren't designed for speed. They're designed for sheer power and sheer strength in the water. We've got a twin turbocharged 12-cylinder diesel running this engine, and this, you know, running this boat, and this engine is monstrous, man. But you know, it's built to do heavy work, and it's got a 700-pound brass prop with four blades on it, and you know, it's just a massive thing. So he says we get up about that early, get on the boat, shove off. You climb back in your bunk, which is in the wheelhouse, because everything's set forward, like I'll show you in the picture that I'll send you. And you just climb on the bunk until he kicks the bunk and says, "Okay, it's time to go. Let's go. Pull the traps." And it's right when the sun's just able to see the water. You can just make out the buoys, because dude, we got a lot of work to do, man. We got, first of all, 300 traps to get through in the first half of the day. That's 300 traps can stretch as far as 17 to 20 miles. And where they're set maybe 30 yards apart.
Yeah.
That way, and there's two of us on the stern. There's only three guys on the boat. There's a captain, the first mate, and second mate. There's Clark and myself as first and second mate. Clark is on the port stern. I'm on the starboard stern, because I'm right-handed. He's left-handed, and it worked out perfect.
Wow.
Because when they're on that side of the boat, he can reach out with his left hand, grab that trap. Now, we're not doing like when I mentioned Deadliest Catch. The similarities are in this manner. That you see them throwing that grapple line out there between two bags that are floating, and there's a line strung between there that grapple grabs a hold of, and they take the hold. Now they can pull the rope in. Ours is just a single buoy, slightly smaller than a soccer ball, you might say, and it's got our number stamped on it, melted into it. So we know this is our string. And well, we have our individually made, and a lot of what we're called pullers. We design our own catch pole, it's called. And mine was simply maybe a 7-foot piece of 1x1 wooden pressure treated lath material that I had taken a shark's tooth or shark hook, and I ground the barb off of it, and I um, adhered that to the end of the pole with fiberglass, and build a handle. And we're all designing our own shit. So all I had to do was reach out as far as I could reach,
Yeah.
grab that buoy, pull it up, and take the buoy and put it through like this, through a block and tackle hanging there, and then down, and then put it around that thing. You see that giant thing on board, that big crab boat spinning, that big disc. They put the rope through it like this, and it starts to coil it, grab it.
Yeah.
Well, what it is actually is designed like two pie plates together like this. And when you put the rope in between it, it cinches that rope and pulls on it.
Wow.
So that's what actually pulls on the rope. And then down below at about maybe 7 o'clock, if you look at it as a clock dial, there's another little piece sticking out between that thing like this. It's called a knife. It's not really a cutting tool.
Yeah.
What it does is it kicks the rope back out so it doesn't continue to wrap around that big spinning disc. Now they can take theirs and pull it over and put it into a coiler that'll coil the rope for them, because they got like sometimes 500, 700, 800 feet of line, because they're fishing in sometimes 300 fathoms of water, and a fathom is as wide as you can stretch your hands. It's typically 6 feet.
Wow.
So they're only pulling just so many a day and shit like that. But the method is the same. It does the same thing. So when I pull my trap and it's coming up, Mark is on the other side. He's just finishing up cleaning his trap out of catch, rebaiting it, fixing it, repairing it, whatever needs to happen. And he has to do this within the time it takes me to get to my next buoy and get ready to pull my trap. Because when I pull my trap, he's pushing his back over. Yeah. We're always dropping one and picking one. We always drop one where we pick one off like this. So he has, from the time he pulls his trap till we get to the next one, to do all that. Empty the good crab out, replace the bait, fix the lathing on the trap and nail it all together, take knots out of the shit. And he needs to be ready, because when I grab mine, he's throwing his. So we get 300 done. And typically, when we got so good at this after a while, by just, because, we're not stupid guys. We're trying to, it's more advantageous to work smart rather than hard, but, the work in and of itself, regardless of how easy you tried to make or smoothly you tried to make it, it was still make a fucking man out of you in a hurry. Yeah. And I'm getting to this point here in just a second. Well, they're telling me this is how it's done. So you get first 300, and we got to a point where it's like 10 o'clock in the morning and we're having lunch already. That's how good we got at it.
Wow.
Then we skip over about 50 yards and pull 20 miles back the other way, the other 300. Yeah. And then, we're just taking it out of the crab traps, and I'll send you a picture of a crab trap. Some of the bull crabs we were catching have claws as big as my hand.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how big these fucking things are, man. I mean, they're a delicacy found only in these southern waters here. Yeah. And they're sold all over the world for the most ridiculous prices. That's why it's such a lucrative business.
Yeah.
So we did all right as stone crabbers. We were making a decent living, but you broke your fucking ass doing it, man. And most of the guys would last one season, maybe two. Yeah. So when we came down to Florida, Mark had his job ready to go on this boat, and he was already working. And the guy working next to him, who was actually the first mate, because Mark just came on, excuse me, for some clown from Michigan or some state from up north and here in the States. And Captain Billy didn't really know him. Neither did his daddy, Hubert, Billy's father. They didn't really know anything about the guy and that. And obviously, due to, what I'm about to tell you, Billy was itching to get back and, and go to work, And so it didn't take him but a week, to work this guy to death, and he quit. That's just how badass of job this is, because I mean, it's ball busting work, and if you're catching, if you're not catching, you get to about 5, 10, 15 traps, and captain looks out there and he looks in those boxes where you're throwing those crab over your shoulder all day,
Yeah.
loading the boxes and behind, because you take the claws from the crab and throw the crab back on your way
Yeah.
home, because that crab will grow, and in 2 years it'll grow another claw back legal enough to
Wow.
take.
Yeah.
So we're actually harvesting these crabs. If you get professional enough, you break the claw off just right.
Yeah.
And throw it back, it'll generate and grow a new claw. So we're actually farming and harvesting these things. So you don't take the claw while you take the trap and put it back in there, because you're just throwing a crab back on your trap that doesn't have claws now, but it's stupid enough to climb back in there.
Yeah.
So that being said, and the lucrativeness of the business could afford us, certain things that most people weren't normally available to them at, in a small fishing village such as that.
Yeah.
And I could make, during a week, and I was seasonal work.
Yeah.
Because from May 15th or October 15th to May 15th is season. So
Yeah.
you have before that until then to get you can't start pulling your traps until October 15th, but you can get them out there.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
can get them out there, and when that first day comes, you're ready to start fishing. You're not just taking your shit out.
Yeah.
And then by May 15th, by May 15th, you have to have your traps off the water by May 15th. You can't catch up until that day and then go pick your traps up, because what are you doing? You're still catching as those traps are sitting out there.
Yeah.
So it wouldn't be to your advantage to take those crabs that you just all caught, throw them all back in the water.
Yeah.
Rail dump them is what it's called. But
Okay.
barring all of that, this is the scenario as it was imparted to me. So they get rid of this fucking guy from Michigan, right?
Yeah.
Billy's like, get Timmy out here. See if Timmy wants to come to work on the boat. So they get me and they tell me the story about how you do it. You wake up, blah, 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 like I just told you. So my first day, I get up and about 3:30 in the morning, and I walk down, and the two main modes of transportation on this 129-acre island, you're either bought a bicycle, actually three ways. You've either got a bicycle, you've either got a golf cart, or you got your 2 fucking feet. Bare feet, because it's not that big a place. You're not going to drive over to your buddy's house. Just get the damn car started, get it in gear, and you're parking the fucking,
Yeah.
But cool
Falcon.
place to grow up, as a kid, anyways, amongst all those islands. And we were literally, Chokoloskee Island is, and I'll send you pictures also of the overview of what's called the 10,000 Islands. And this is a rather unique piece of geography that is only found right here in Southwest Florida, like it's found anywhere else in the world. You won't find it like this. And it's literally a labyrinth of 10,000 mangrove islands with little cuts and corners and turns and dead ends and shit that you don't even know are there unless you live here. This is where we played as kids, man. We were running this shit.
Yeah.
It's in our backyard, quite literally.
Yeah.
And when you're running boats as kids and fucking off and doing shit, and you're running the outer islands, you're finding these little tricks and hideouts and ways to go. Well, you have to continuously do this, because what you're seeing is all done by visual cue. There's no markers out there and shit, to follow. There's no signs that says fucking turn here, none of that shit. And that's always changing. So you always have to be aware, and you have to be on top of your game, always out there fucking around. And that's what we were always doing, because there's not much else to do in Everglades, man. But get your boat and go screw off, or in an airboat and go fuck off in the weeds in the glades somewhere or some shit like that, But ours was that labyrinth of islands, and that's what made what we were doing so incredibly. And I don't want to say easy and sound blasé in that manner of speaking, but it was knowing the islands and knowing how to get in and out of them and where to go and where not to go was a huge advantage when you're bringing a load of marijuana into this country.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, my first day going out on this boat, like I said, 3:30, I'm in the boat. I get my lunch. We cast off. I climb in the bunk and I'm snoozing away. And I've never done the best sleeping I've ever done in my life was done on a boat.
Wow.
And because you hear that, all you hear is that deep rumble of that engine, that big diesel engine, and the boat's doing its rocking and it's doing its thing. And man, it's just a lullaby to me, And I wake up and the sun's fucking up already, and I'm thinking to myself, we thought we were supposed to be starting when the sun, just before the sun comes up. The goddamn sun's shining right through the fucking window. I can see it, right? I
Ah.
leaned over and I looked out of the bunk, and there's Billy, Captain Red in the book. He's looking down at me from his chair, and he's got a big grin on his face. And he goes, Timmy, he says, dude, we're not going to pull traps today, buddy. He says, we're going to hang off out here all day today and, and screw around and maybe swim a little bit, fish. And then this afternoon, we're going to go offshore a little bit further and unload a pop boat from Colombia. And I said, okay, boing, what the fuck? Okay, yeah, sure, why not? And it was a bit of a tongue in the cheek sort of an affair for Mark and Billy, because they knew what the fuck was going on. They wanted to spring it on me when I got out there because they know I'd be cool with it.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah, okay, what the hell? So my first day, I never pulled a stone crab ever that first day.
Yeah.
So we go out that night later, and the way this part of the scenario works is you typically wait off the horizon, what's called the horizon, anywhere. If you're in the outback or you're out in the water, as far as you can see, things will shrink and disappear like this. When they get to the point where you can't see them any longer, that's your horizon line. And on the water, that horizon line is typically 10 miles, 10 to 12 miles, depending on how high above the water your vessel is sitting at from your point of view. 10 miles. So we would sit off that horizon line where you couldn't see the loaded vessel we're going to approach. And when it came 3-4 hours before sundown, that's when the captain and every boat that came to us had a particular call sign that they would listen for. He would call out that call sign once or twice and wait for a response. Once we got that response, then we would take off toward that boat that was sitting on the coordinates that we knew it was supposed to be sitting on, because in those days there wasn't such a thing as GPS.
Yeah.
We were using what was called LORAN, and that's an acronym for Long Range Aid to Navigation. That's what everybody in the fucking world used, a LORAN.
Yeah.
It was sent out by radio signals, triangulated, and the antennas on the boat, the LORAN antennas, would pick up those signals and triangulate your location. And they were quite accurate. I mean, they were really very accurate, surprisingly. It would put me within a couple of feet of a dive spot or a wreck that I want to dive on all the time. I mean, just, amazing technology, even at that time.
Yeah.
But GPS being what it is today makes that look like, a black and white television, I guess something in comparison. But
Yeah.
So we would start approaching this vessel once we got a reply, so they know that the boat coming to it is the one that should be. Don't freak out. And that gives them time to start bringing the load and getting it from underneath, because their shit's hidden down underneath, whether it's a shrimp boat or a freighter or whatever this stuff is on. And there wound up being 15 tons, 30,000 pounds on this boat that night. And we pulled up next to it. And this isn't one of the cases whereby we didn't have to get up on that boat and help that crew get it out of the hole, stack it on deck and then get on our boat. Then they could throw it down. We always helped each other out in that respect. But don't get me wrong, there was none of this, hey, dude, how you doing? I'm guessing there was none of that shit going on. I was like, get to fucking work. Hey, what's up, bro? We get to work and throw fucking bales until you puke, because it's hot down there. The engines are running and you're unloading this, 15 tons of shit or whatever. And, you puke and you throw some more bales, because once you start, you can't stop. You got to finish the fucking job. There's no quitting until it's where it belongs, and that's on the island. So we grab our 15 tons that night and we head back in. And when we get it into shore, just to the outside rim of the 10,000 islands, as I described, we would kill our engine. Now we're not hiding this shit. It's all over the deck. I mean, it's stacked in a big, huge mountain on the back of this boat. In the earlier days, the bales were coming in what we called pillow bales. They weren't even packed. I mean, compressed like a normal, like people see in the television or the news or in books or magazines, what a bale, a brick bale, a rectangular one looks like. They didn't look like that in the early days. They hadn't gotten to that degree of sophistication yet. These were just like somebody put their foot in the bag and went like this, and then put some tape around it, and then put it in a burlap bag and then sewed that shut, and they were coming all different sizes. I'm seeing them from 40 pounds to 120 pound big. I mean, who the fuck's going to pick this thing up? And by the time we got to them, there's no telling how many times these things have been handled. Some of them have got cuts in the side of them and they're leaking. And, and the weed in those days, the smoke in those days, it was all Caribbean with marijuana. Yep. In the same over in, in your end of the world, coming out of Thailand or places such as that, in Vietnam, places such as that, it was seedy, the only Caribbean weed that I ever saw during those times that wasn't as seedy as all the rest of it came from Jamaica. Wow. They were more in tune with what they call the virgin bud vine. The virgin bud being the female plant, which is the one you want. Yep. You don't want the male plant because the male plant's the one that's causing all the cross-pollination and was causing all the seeding to happen. But when you're growing it, and I've been into Colombia, I can't tell you how many times, and looking down between the mountains and seeing a quarter way up the mountainside and all the way down through the valley as far as you can see weed growing. I mean, pot, Colombian weed, just as far as it can see growing. Wow. This is how ridiculous it is. So there's very impossible for you to keep males away from females. So the shit was seedy. Yeah. That being said, we're having to work with this shit. You're sending us this shit, and not only do we have to take it from you and put it on our big boat. By the way, that first 30,000 pounds that we did, that very first time I ever saw a bale of pot come off a boat, I never saw a load that small. That was considered small, 15 tons. I never saw one that small after that. Oh. The very second night we went out to work on that boat, or that day we went out to work on that boat, we didn't work the second day either. For 2 days, I go to work on this fucking boat. I did the first crab trap, man. That second night, we unloaded a boat with 22 tons on it. Wow. Now, we had to get up and help that crew put that shit up on the deck and then help them, then have them toss it down to us. And we had it stacked, Jesus, on the bow of the boat, on the sides, up to the windows, and then on the wheelhouse. You got the wheelhouse, and then you got the antennas, and you got the radar turning. We stacked it up just high enough where the radar could turn, and all the way straight back till we almost sunk the fucking boat. I mean, that's how much weed. And because of the way it was packaged, it wasn't baled and bundled nicely. I mean, it was nasty. Yeah. We get it back in and we give it to whoever, and knowing the shore crew does their thing. They take it from us. We pull up to shut our engines off. 15, 20, sometimes 30, depending on how big the loads are that are coming in. We brought in as much as 55 tons a night, just to give you an idea. But that being said, the boats would have to make, they come up to us as soon as we kill our engines. They hear us. They're waiting on us. Yeah. They come up to us and stop, and they got 2 guys on each boat, and they're like as many as you could get around this boat, because we're not hiding this shit. There's no way to hide 22 tons of shit put on this 51-foot boat, dude. I mean, it's everywhere. The boat rolls too hard one side, this shit's rolling off. I mean, that's how much shit there's on this boat. And so they take it as many trips as they can back and forth through these islands, not through the main passages. We've made our own passageways that only we know about to get through to the island where we live, Chokoloskee, and one of the inner islands, and literally put the entire load into 1 or 2 of our friends' houses that we've literally taken all the furniture out of. And we fill the house from the back to the front, man. We fill the bedrooms, the bathrooms, the living room, the kitchen, the dining room, closets. Every place you could stick a bale of weed, this shit was in there, right? And if the house was full, shut the door and move next door to Jimmy's house, start putting the shit in his house, right? Wow. So at the same time, so you've got us who bring the load in. You got the boat that came from Colombia. You got all those little boats with 2 guys on each boat, that bring the shit and shuttling it from us to the house. You've got the bale handlers on shore moving it from the boats into the house. You got the guys in the house stacking this shit everywhere. I mean, it takes a lot of people. It takes anywhere from, 50 to 60 people to make one job work, because there's so many different moving pieces. Yeah. Now, I haven't even gotten halfway with the scenario yet. Now, while the house is being loaded at night, a lot of times what the drivers, this is the next day, we move this shit to Miami out of these houses in broad daylight the next day. That's when that work is done.
Yeah.
We're masters of hide the shit in plain sight, basically. And, you just started reading the book, so hang on to your fucking shorts, dude. That's a story coming.
Yes.
And I do describe this scenario in my book, whereby, the owners of the vehicles are never the ones that drive the material to Miami. And the owners of the boats are never on those boats that go offshore to do the work or any on the water work. And there's a reason for that. Reason being is that if the boat is ever captured or vehicles are ever stopped, the driver has what's called a 2-meter radio. And we had hundreds of these things, because we're not only working on our crew. Hell, there were 5 crews in Southwest Florida that we were working, that I ultimately wound up working all 5 crews. When we get to that point, I'll help you understand. 50 to 60 people easy on each crew. So half the entire southwest coast of Florida was hauling weed in the 70s and 80s, man. And it was all coming, through us primarily, because we had our generations. I was what was considered a 3rd generation pot hauler. That meant that the guys and gals that I grew up with learned from the fathers and the uncles and the older cousins, who in turn learned from the generation prior to them. So we were 3rd generations into this thing. Yeah. That's how, over the years, the sophistication and the method by which this was all done got so sophisticated, because we were learning as the generations come by, and new technology and new equipment, and it's just the shape and the way of life, man. It's the way of the world. But more importantly, to this part of the story, was that the owners of the vehicles would a lot of times drive out to the houses at night while they're being loaded and get their vehicle loaded ahead of time. Drive it back into town and park it right in the front yard. I mean, with 2,000-3,000 pounds of shit. If it's a van or it's a truck or it's a Bronco or something, you could black the windows out on it or whatever. They would take airbags, put them in where the springs, inside the springs, inflate those airbags so the vehicle wouldn't compress. So when you put the weight in there, it just read level like it was supposed to. Yeah. Get it to Miami and unload the shit. Then you just reach underneath, and with your fingers, there's a little valve, just like on your tire. Let the air back out, and it'll step back down like it's supposed to, nice and level. So you never know when it's full or it's empty. Just want to know a little trick in the trade. So when the next day, when it's daylight and the sun's coming up, that's when the shore crew starts to take over and do their job. Now their job is to empty that fucking house of that 22 tons, or depending on how many tons are on the island. And I mean, at one point I've seen, 8 houses full to the rim. 8 houses, I mean, talking single family home, full to the front door, full of shit. That's how much stuff I've seen on the island at any one time. And the next day is when the cars and the trucks and the vans and the women get involved, and they drive this shit to Miami. They're giving us a place to go, a particular plaza or a strip mall or someplace like that, typically on the east side of Miami, in an area off of what's called Chrome Avenue and Kendall. Between there and the Homestead is when you start getting to the next Isle Morada, but then you get to the Keys, going that direction. But they take it to us, they're told where to go to this plaza, park the vehicle in the parking lot of this plaza, get out of it and go window shop for a while. And we would have one of our crew working with the Miami crew, one of their guys, who actually owned the shit. We never wanted to own it. We were getting paid to get it, buy it, bring it into the country for X number of dollars a pound. We'll put this shit right on your doorstep. You pay us. We don't want to fuck with selling it, because now you got the dealers and the sellers, and you got, screw that. We were making enough. I mean, the money was a pain in the ass enough as it is, man. We don't need any more work. I'll get to that too. But so we'll take this shit to Miami, and if you owe us $20 million, let's say, for doing this particular load for you, now we don't get paid. And the most common misconception about how all this shit works is that I bring your shit into you and I give it to you in Miami. I get paid and I drive home with the money. Well, I'm sorry. Yeah. Excuse me. It doesn't happen that way. Yeah. I have to get paid when that load begins to sell. Once that load begins to sell, I get paid out of that job. So
Yeah.
it could be a week, 2 weeks, before I even see any money at all from that job. But in
Wow.
that 2 week period, I may have done 3 or 4, 5 more
Yeah.
jobs in the meantime, and as a
Wow.
kid doing this shit, going offshore and unloading these boats. And from time to time, of course, I'd get that paper bag full of cash slid across the kitchen table at me.
Wow.
And there were times when I was getting a big bag of cash, several of them at a time, for jobs I don't remember having done. That's just how it was, growing up as a kid. I'm 21 years old. Imagine this, growing up with your friends, you're kicking around, you're on an island, you're barefoot and you're in shorts all the time. You're averaging 100 to 150,000 plus a week, 150,000 US dollars a week as
Holy
kids,
shit.
just fucking off. I mean, dude,
That's
imagine that.
crazy.
So, so here comes these paper bag books. That's how it worked. And the reason it worked that way was simply because if you owe me $20 million, it's going to take you 2 weeks or 3 weeks to generate enough money to start paying us. I'll send, by the time I'm buying this, or we're buying this stuff in the Caribbean, anywhere in the Caribbean you wanted to buy weed from, we had a connection there. Jamaica, Venezuela, South America, Central America, Panama, Belize, Honduras. Belize, even before it became Belize, was British Honduras.
Wow.
And we could buy it for $10 a pound. Well, when you get that same $10 a pound shit into United States territorial waters, it now becomes anywhere between 500 and 750 a pound.
Wow.
So I could literally take $300,000 of some jackass cocaine cowboy's money from Miami to the Caribbean and buy him 30,000 pounds of weed. And by the time I get that shit to Miami, I've turned that $300,000 into 15 million or more. Now, a job that size, 30,000 is around 5 million. So I'm paid 5 million. You just made $10 million off a $300,000 investment in 8 days. That's typically how long it takes to get from loaded South Caribbean, northern Colombia to Florida, barring any other unforeseen weather circumstances, or what have you. 8 days, I turned 300,000 into 15 million. You think these fucking guys are shooting at me?
Yeah.
Dude, they can't give me money fast enough to go back. I mean, it was like, woohoo! It was super lottery, time, and that's why it became so lucrative and so, and that's what started the ball rolling when these guys discovered it. Hey, man, look what the fuck they're doing over here,
Yeah.
So that being said, what I would do is, if you, like I said, if you owed me that $20 million, that shit came in, I sent it all down to Miami, except for $20 million worth of it I'll keep. I'll keep it at somebody's place here in Naples or in, close by. And now that he's gone and passed away, I'll go ahead and say, this is the first podcast I've ever let this bit of information go, just so you know.
Wow.
Only because the gentleman was such a dear, dear friend of mine. Since I was a kid, we worked together and did some shit together, some crazy shit together. He passed away several years ago, unfortunately, because he's just, as older men do. But he was the mayor of Everglades City during that time we were working, and I was working as a kid. He had been mayor even to the point through over the years, for God knows how many 10 decades he was mayor of this town. But when I was keeping your $20 million worth of shit, I was keeping it at the mayor's house.
Holy shit, man.
So that just gives you an idea of how connected we were at that point in time. I mean, the older generations, they had senators and judges and congressmen on the payroll. I mean, this wasn't it wasn't a violent industry when our generations were involved in it. And simply because of the numbers I just explained to you. If I can turn 300 grand into 15 million in 8 days, you fucking crazy, dude.
Yeah.
You leave this fucking guy alone.
Yeah.
You leave these people alone, man. You don't fuck with them. So that's why it was so. And they kept coming back and coming back, and then
like
consequently,
the golden goose.
as we talked about the bales being what they were. I mean, they had gotten to the point where I was literally, my partner and I, Clark in the book, Mark, I'm going to say Mark every now and then, but remember that's Clark in the book. Should you get the book? And please buy the book, by the way. Because you'll never hear this story from anybody other than reading it right there or hearing it come out of this pie hole right here. Because the U.S. government's never going to tell you the story. They're never going to tell you how a bunch of kids got over on them for years, because even during the years when the adults were, had the, running the show, it was us kids that were doing all the fucking work. I mean, think about it. You think all these old timers are out there, moving 800 to 1,000 80-pound fucking bales of weed sometimes two times a night? You think they're doing that shit? Oh, no. That's the kids' job. You guys do this, do that. And that was a testament really to the fact that, the violence aspect in which I spoke of. Because in, thinking about it, and me as a father and a grandfather now, thinking back on it, who in their right fucking mind would put their children's lives at risk by allowing them to go offshore and unload freighters full of marijuana from other countries?
Yeah.
If that sort of violence took place, think about it.
Yeah.
The violence didn't happen that way simply because they were making too much fucking money. You're not going to fucking kill people that are making you multimillionaires overnight, for Christ's sake. No, you give them more money to go get some more shit. So that being said, part of the job was get this shit off the boat, get them, and then whatever the shore crew did with it, that was their problem. We had to go offshore and clean up.
Yeah.
Now it's like 2, 3 in the morning. We got to go clean this fucking shit off the boat, and then maybe pull a couple of traps the next morning and then come in, because it's not uncommon for a boat such as ours, a work vessel, to spend the evening, out on the water, due to whatever reasons. Maybe they want to get more catch, or maybe they just, because crabs will stay that way, but regardless. And we go offshore, and I had literally, dude, Tommy, I have literally swept into piles with brooms and an ice shovel, big fucking ass ice shovel, and scooped and threw this shit overboard. I've literally probably thrown more overboard than 100 people can smoke in their lifetime, man, easily. And I bet I've dumped out of my boots more shit than 20 men could smoke in their lifetime. It was that nasty. And we're going for screwdrivers and knives and shit, trying to get it out of the cracks and clean it up, and finally, we go off to do a job one night, and Captain Billy had gotten, 3 rolls of visqueen plastic, and 5 rolls of duct tape. And what we wound up doing was literally lining the inside of this boat from the back of the wheelhouse all the way to the stern, because it's an open deck vessel. I mean, it's wide fucking open. It was designed to carry the stone crab traps as we stacked them on there. 600 of them at a time. That's 40,000 plus pounds of fucking traps, or shit like that. And by its nature, it's very perfectly designed for putting bales of pod. When they became bales of pod, what I'm talking about now is the mess they were making. Because if something should have become suspect, or for whatever reason, and they're out there looking around, and they're just arbitrarily boarding vessels, and they get on your shit and find a bud or a seed or some shit like that, your ass is gone. They'll confiscate the boat. They'll ask questions later. They'll just take your shit. So it was important to stay clean. So that was our job. Clean this fucking thing up. Get as much sleep as we can, if there was any to be gotten, because it took so long. But now we figured out the plastic thing. So, okay, bring that shit on. So now when we get up, we go offshore to clean the boat up. It was just a simple matter of pulling it all together and tying a chain around it with a big giant anchor and throwing the fucker overboard. Now the boat's clean. Wow. So we're going on like this for, I don't know how, but one season of hauling, pot went like this. And then the bales started coming, because the older generation said, look, that's enough of this shit. Us having to be responsible for your shit once we take it off of your boat, or once we put it on our boat from Colombia or wherever we're getting it. Now we are responsible for somebody else's shit, because we paid you. We're responsible for this shit. And you're giving us shit that's fucking, I mean, I've been on boats as a kid, just as a matter of course, just a little sidebar here, that Clark and I on board. A lot of times, like I said, we get out and help that crew get shit on deck first, because I've seen literally freighters at 400 feet, if there were a foot, with as much as 200,000 and 300,000 pounds of Colombian marijuana on them at one time, on how many boats we would take at any one time, depending on how many houses and crews we had available to take 3-4 days to unload one boat. I mean, that's how stupid and ridiculous this shit was.
Yeah.
But what wound up happening was the older generations finally in the early 80s, say 80-ish, 79, going on 80s, when the advent of the household and commercial trash compactors started coming on the scene, you started seeing commercials about them and shit like this. Well, bing, fucking light goes on, and some of these guys take about 4 or 5 of these compactors down to Columbia, and they said, look here.
Yeah.
Here's what we're going to do.
Wrap this up.
So they've got a bank of maybe 3 generators running in the background, and they've got these trash compactors, and now it's throw some shit in there, compact it. Throw some more shit in there, compact it. Yeah. Now the bales are coming out all the same size, all the same, pretty much the same weight. Yeah. And they're rectangular, a lot more easier to handle. So by the very nature of changing what they do and the way they did it in South America, all of a sudden made our loads bigger.
Yeah.
Because now they're more compacted. Now they're more stackable. Now they're easier to handle. So we just lit a fuse, man, that went right straight through the Caribbean and every other pot hauler in America. And I'm always fond of saying, and and I always will, that we're not the only ones hauling fucking pot, man. Yep. I mean, there were pot haulers all over the United States doing their thing, and and God bless their asses, whether they made it or not. They were contributing to what is now being viewed across, most of the world as, something that was should have had a skull and crossbones attached to it, to being something that is relatively benign. Or actually good for you, in a matter of speaking, in a lot of ways, considering the cannabinoid aspect. But that's a whole other thing for a whole other time. But needless to say, now the jobs are getting bigger, they're getting heavier, we're getting paid more, but it's moving a whole lot quicker and a whole lot faster. That was one of the advantages to growing up in the industry and seeing that evolutionary change. And what ultimately wound up happening was, we had worked, and there's a chapter you're going to read about in the book, Thomas, where our crew worked 28 nights in a row. Yeah. And a lot of the guys that were working at that time, the guys and gals that were working with, would have said it was more than that, but I left it at 28. And that's night after night. That's 30 tons. And now that first job I ever did, the one that I told you about, that 15 tons. Yeah. I had never since that day saw one that small. That was just like a test run. That was to see if you guys could, do the work, kind of a thing. Shit. Because the next night was 22 tons. Yeah. I mean, that was the average size. Now they're 20 tons. They're 30 tons. We did 55 tons one night. When it wasn't because of the money. I mean, the money was a pain in the fucking ass, and everybody was having a problem with it. Really, it was more about see how much we can do this time and get away with it. It was that kind of a game after a while. So during that stretch, during that run, I had, and because of the way things worked, and, with the 2-meter radios that I talked about, and we had like 200 of these things, because everybody that's hauling or touching a bale of pot has one of these radios. Even if you're working next to a guy working right next to you, he's got one too. Everybody on the 50, 60 person crew that's working day and night has this radio, because communication is, by far one of the most important things that could take place when you're doing something like this, is communication. Yeah. Now, when we're running from a mothership, as they're described, bringing the load inshore from the mothership so the little boats can grab it, put it on the island, and so on. We have running alongside of us what's called a chase boat. I'll send you a picture of my personal chase boat. In this case, it's a 31-foot Chris Craft Scorpion with 400 horsepower, 200 offshore Mercs, twins, that would probably do 60 mile an hour before your ass even hit the sea. Designed for offshore, deep V offshore. It's a rugged and a shallow drafting, a rugged offshore deep V, all around just kick-ass boat. It cost me $90,000, for this boat. But that was like a night's work, man. But that being said, the reason why that boat is there, and it's called a chase boat, is because if we have 1, 2, or 3 boats working alongside coming from the mothership loaded, dude, like I said, we're not hiding this shit. There's no way to hide, 20 tons of shit on a boat this size. If you were to fly over our boat and look at it from an airplane from above, loaded like it was, it would look like a huge mound of bales moving through the water with a radar on it, because you couldn't see the boat. That's how much shit was
Wow.
on these things. So we're moving, 2 or 3 at a time. We've got this chase boat running there empty alongside of us. One guy in it. And he's sitting over there, he's fired up and he's smoking away. And we're sitting on our big stack because the captains are busy in the wheelhouse doing their job. They're on the radar. You're listening to radar. They're monitoring all the channels and all this shit. I mean, they're dialed in. They're doing their job. We did ours.
Yeah.
We offloaded that fucking mothership and loaded this bitch. And now we're sweating through our fucking clothes.
Yeah.
Now we're going to sit on this fucking shit and we're going to try some of it. So if it's any good, we can tell the guys on shore, hey, you need to grab some of this shit. That's just how it worked. So yeah. I'm checking it out. I'm smoking on my fucking spleef, and I look over at Mikey, and he's in the chase boat alongside of us. And what that boat's designed for is if the Captain Billy, any of the other captains will have a radar that they can watch. Now that's 50-mile radius, and you can shrink it down to 45 to 40 to 35 to 30, 25, and down like that. So as the target gets closer, you can shrink in and zero in on it exactly to get a more definitive radar return to see if that boat's coming to us. Fucking, we just get off onto that other boat right there next to us and let them have the shit. We're gone. They never even knew we were there. They show up and there's nobody on these boats because why? First of all, the owners of the boat, Captain Billy, didn't own the boat. His daddy did.
Yeah.
So if it looked like they were going to get busted, and certainly beyond a doubt get boarded, he would get on the radio and call home to Dad and say, hey, Dad, jig's up. Dad would immediately hang up and call the Marine Patrol or law enforcement and report that boat stolen.
Yeah.
Or hijacked or some shit because we don't know where it is. And what will wind up happening is, and the vehicle's done the same way. If they get stopped or whatever, for whatever reason, they call and say, hey, then that owner says, hey, I looked out the driveway and shit, my truck's gone. My car's gone. Well, them having reported it stolen relieves them of any responsibility for which that thing has been involved in.
Yeah.
It'll be used and stored as evidence, but ultimately returned to the owner. So that everybody gets their shit back.
Yeah.
So that was another thing involved in it. Now, when it came to the guys driving this shit to Miami and the gals, now we're unloading a house, at any one time, any day for 28 days. Imagine 28 nights in a row, 30 tons, 40 tons one night, 55 tons that one night. Yeah. Then that very next night, we're doing another 30. We're doing this, and everybody on the island, and we could only work 2 or 3 nights in a row because, dude, you try to work a crew or a couple of guys any longer than that, you kill their ass.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, we're moving 800, at the minimum, 800 bales a night. Sometimes we're off the big boat to our boat, from our boat to their boat. It's being moved several times.
Yeah.
Your ass is burned the fuck out. So you got to take a break.
Yeah.
Let another crew or another couple of guys that's why a town of just under 500 people, half the fucking town was involved in it because this is just what it took to get the job done. When it say it takes a village, well, in this case, it took a fucking village. Yeah. So that being said, I've got one of my days off, and it was just after that 55-ton night. I made $75,000 that night.
Wow.
I'm 22. I'm 22 years old. Jesus.
That's crazy.
So I had the next couple of days off. So I'm going to go check these houses out, where we've put all of this shit, where we're sticking all this shit, and all these cars are going by during the day. I mean, they're driving off the island, waving at the sheriff, waving at the deputy. Anybody that might be watching, they're just driving. Who would expect 40 tons of weeds coming out of this little island? And to be honest with you, there's only one way in there and one way out. There's only one fucking road, dude. I mean, it's got to come out of there somehow. But they didn't know. They didn't know to the extent to which this was taking place. So it was easy to be considered, hiding in plain sight, which we were bloody masters of. And and wave at you a lot of times when we're going past you and this sort of thing. But with that regard, see, we had our safety valve out on the water, which was a chase boat.
Yeah.
Now, what the drivers have from this 120-mile trek, they got to take across from Florida, from Everglades City to Miami. It's about 120 miles. They've got to drive this one fucking road.
Yeah.
US 41 is the only road they take you from Everglades City directly to Miami. There's only one way to do it. That's that road. Now you're out there with your ass hanging in the wind. That's something I always thought, that these guys and gals driving these cars and trucks and shit, they're the ones with the brass balls.
Yeah.
These guys, these are the ones that have their shit together, because there's no fucking way. I'm always telling myself, there's no goddamn way you catch me driving this shit. You know,
Yeah.
I'm out here on the water. I got that chase boat, dude. We're gone off in the night and we're gone. You know,
Yeah.
we're good to go. But what the drivers had was, during any one job, no less than between 8 and 12 to 15 what we called spotter drivers. Yep. These guys and gals' job was to do nothing but drive from Everglades to that mall and back.
Wow.
They got paid $5,000 a day. All they had to do was drive over and drive back, and they were all staggered. 12 of them driving this route. So if anybody got stopped for whatever reason in the world they may have gotten stopped for, they're instructed and they were taught to, because now that your van, typically we're using vans because, you know, we get 30 pieces of 35 bales of van. Now it weighs, you know, a ton or 2 tons more than it's supposed to. And what happens is, now you've got a pretty good hefty weapon to your advantage. And this, you wait for whoever stops you to get between their vehicle and yours. Yeah. Throw that fucker in reverse and stomp on it. I mean, and take the front end right out of that goddamn
yeah.
Police, that highway patrol or whatever, whoever, the Marine Patrol or whoever he is, and he ain't going anywhere because his shit's gone, you know, because you just smashed the holy fuck out of it all. But you're not going to outrun the radio. All you have to do is take that thing now and drive it down the road far enough around a bend or something where he can't see you. Yeah. Leave the fucker right there in the middle of the road, get out, get into a spotter's car that's already there waiting for you, because you've already called and said, hey, gig's up, you know. The vehicle's already been reported stolen. You're already out of it by the time they get to it, and you're gone. You're already sitting at home. Free and clear. That's just how it worked. So there was a safety mechanism built into both aspects of this, which is all part of the sophistication with which this, you know, this thing came to. So now, once these guys begin to pay me, or pay the big dogs or whatever, say they give you 10 million on your 20 that they owe you, then I would give you 20 million of the stuff that I've kept. Yeah. You trade, you give me my money, I give yours. And the reason it was done that way was simply because you lose your shit in Miami for whatever reasons. We don't want to hear any fucking excuses. Yeah. We're getting paid. I can make one phone call, sell that shit to one individual, and we're all getting paid. Yeah. That guaranteed us getting paid. That's the reason why we kept it. Wow. The way we did. You know, and so that's how the scenario worked. So here we are, we're doing this 28-day stretch. And, you know, I was paid $75,000 that night to, you know, work offshore. Now I'm on shore the next day. We're taking a couple of days off because this is our time, you know, to have our 3 days or whatever off. And I just happened to walk over to one of the houses that has some of this shit in it we just brought in, and they're loading the trucks and the cars and the vans. They're sending them off and shit. And I see one of the big dogs you'll read about in the book, Daryl, one of the 5 Daniels brothers. Yeah. Who's, you know, they were actually, I grew up with their kids. They were part of the 3rd generation. They were teaching their kids how to do this shit so they could continue the family business. Because the story that I wrote about when I talked about us not being the only pot haulers there were, of course we weren't. The story that I talk about is a very unique one, in that for 3 generations and nearly 40 years this went on, and nobody had a fucking clue that the entire town, nearly the entire town, was involved in this for 3 generations. And the millions upon millions of pounds of weed that went across those 2 little islands, nobody had a clue. Yeah. That's the reason why I had to write the book and write the story and tell it the way I did, and be as truthful as absolutely possible in telling it, because getting the grown-ups to the older generation's blessing to write the book in the first place, because I wouldn't done it out of sheer respect. Because I'm opening the book, man, And I'm telling you exactly, because what we all decided was pretty much in a nutshell that, of course, um, we weren't willing to wait 30 or 40 years for someone, some journalist or some half-ass historian to take this story and this one and this one and this one and patch quilt together what they think took place.
Yeah.
We weren't going to allow that to happen. So we all agreed that it should be told by someone who was there, actually, someone who had been involved in as much as I've been involved in it, and tell it truthfully and accurately so the world will understand how this was done generationally. And this is the story that I talk about,
Yeah.
and the uniqueness of it, and how it was done in such a non-violent, family-oriented fashion to let people understand that this industry can be done that way,
Yeah.
because it was. We proved it for over 30 years and 3 generations that not one gun did I ever see growing up as a kid,
Yeah.
ever, never, and it was never even talked about. We were never threatened, and I'm asked about, weren't you afraid?
Yeah.
Were you scared? I mean, fuck no. It was just
Yeah.
what I knew. It was what we knew as kids. This is all we knew was,
Yeah.
30-ton fucking loads of weed. That's all. I mean, there was nothing spectacular about it. It's just like, okay, another night's work. Here we go.
Yeah.
And then a lot of times there would be more there than we expected there to be. And there's some stories I love to tell about that too. But we're working these night after night after night, and because of the way things happened in Miami with the dead drops, our guy would get out, their guy would get in, go empty the vehicle and bring it back empty. Our window shopping guy would get back in the vehicle and go take it and load it again if there was more time during the day. That's how these drops were made in Miami. They were what the law enforcement now describes as a dead drop. We were creating what is now called the dead drop. Our drivers drive to the plaza in Miami they're instructed to go to, park the fucking thing and get out of it, go window shop. And then their guys, like I said, we'd have one of our guys with one of their guys. That's our truck, that's our van, that's our car. They're pointing.
Yeah.
Their guys would go get in them, take it to wherever their stash was, and empty the fucking thing and bring it back.
Yeah.
Once it came back, our people would get back in it and go make another run if there was time. That's why one side ever met the other side.
Yeah.
And because the drivers of the vehicles never owned the vehicle, the drivers never loaded the vehicle because the owners did that. So even if one of them was busted, they couldn't tell anybody where any of the shit was because nobody ever knew it. The drivers didn't know where in Everglades the shit was because it was already loaded when they got it. And the people in Miami, they couldn't tell them where it was in Miami because the guys in Miami took it from them and took it somewhere and brought it back empty. So there was that buffer between us.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
No one, exactly. And this is how the whole thing evolved.
Yeah.
The only people that ever saw or communicated with one another was maybe one or two of the adults or the five brothers, the Daniels brothers, and their Cuban counterparts in Miami that they were working with. They would set up the loads and where to pick them up or how much did you want? We'll go do it. And there was two different ways of doing this. For $175 a pound, I could go, or during that day, they would go anywhere in the Caribbean and buy you as much as you wanted, as much shit as you wanted for $10 a pound.
Yeah.
And put it on your doorstep for $175 a pound. That's what you paid us per pound to do that.
Yeah.
Or you could go get your own shit from wherever, bring your boat out to a pre-designated set of coordinates, and we'll take it from you, bring it and put it on your doorstep. We'll get it into the United States for $145 a pound. We'll do that part for you. Wow. But most of them always optioned for us just do the whole thing. They don't want to follow it. So that's why I found myself, doing my first job ever that I did when I met these Cuban guys, and how that happened simply quite was the day we did that 55 tons. Several days prior to that, during our last days off, Daryl, one of the big dogs, cornered me because I went over to the house to see how shit was going on, and which was a mistake. And because a couple of days prior to that, like I said, during my day off, he had handed me, excuse me, and my buddy Jimmy, a chainsaw and a wrecking bar, a big metal steel fucking wrecking bar. And he pointed to this brand new Winnebago, 40-foot fucking Winnebago, dude. It had 120 miles on it. That's how new this thing was. Most of those miles came from the dealership to get it down to Everglades, And he says, I want you to go into that thing and strip everything that you can strip out of that goddamn thing from the windows down. I want it gone. And we even took out the seats. We stripped the captain's chair seats and everything. We threw them out the fucking door. So when you look at this thing, you could see the curtains and the cabinets and stuff. But if you were tall enough where you could walk up to it, look in the window like that, there was nothing, man. I mean, it was stripped down to the bare nothing. Wires were cut and everything. I mean, the plumbing was cut. I mean, you name it. And they stacked 11,500 pounds of bales in this thing. And it was from one window. Now, when you look in there, it's not, you don't see, you see is straight across the other window, bales laying stacked like this, right across the fucking thing. And they did the same thing in this. Vehicle, they put the airbags in the springs and they inflated them. So when you put 11,500 pounds in this fucker, it wasn't sparking the highway all the way to Miami, because that's just what it would be. I mean, it would be down there. So it rode staunch and level and high, just like it was supposed to. Well, I go over to the house, that, like I said, see what's going on. And Daryl goes, Timmy, come here. And I'm like, oh, fuck. And I'm thinking, exactly what he was going to ask me. He asked me, he said, dude, listen, Timmy, he says, I need somebody that I can trust to drive this Winnebago to Miami. And he said, the reason I need somebody I can trust is because it can't go to the plaza where all the other drivers are going. It has to go straight to the stash house. Now, anybody in the crew, any of the crews in Southwest Florida, nobody ever met the other crew, the other side. There was always that buffer between us. It was always there for a reason. This was all part of the overall scheme of things. You don't involve as many as people as need to be. But in this case, he said, and it was true, you get within 40 foot of this fucking thing, you can smell it. So there's no way you're driving it into a plaza somewhere and parking it, I mean, that's like, why not just, put a big sign on it and weed in this fucking thing, So I said, being as who it was asking me, I relented and okay, yeah, why not? He said, I'll give you $35,000 just for taking it. It's a 120-mile trip. One way, 35 grand. He said, but I need you to stay there all day. When the load stops coming in that evening, they're going to give you a car with money in it, full of money, and I want you to drive that back to me. Hence the immense trust that needed to be engendered here. So I agreed, naturally, and here I am, and I'm the one that has to now, since we took the seats out of this fucking thing, we had to literally pull one of the bales out like this, so I could sit down in between them fuckers and drive, because there was no seats. I mean, it's bales all the way up to the dashboard, and I'm, just enough room to steer and work the pedals, right? So, okay, what the fuck? I drive this thing. I spend the day, one thing leads to another. Skipping ahead, I had met all the guys over there, and because I spent the day with them, playing poker and doing, just fucking off. And I get the money back, and it was several months. Wasn't several months after that came what they called Operation Everglades. Now that was a federally funded and federally run drug interdiction operation that involved every branch of law enforcement in these United States, including FBI, CIA, Secret Service, DEA, FBI, FDLE, which is Florida Department of Law Enforcement. There was a local sheriff's Trident task force that was involved. I mean, anybody who was a who's who. There were over 250 federal agents involved in coming down to this little town and taking it over in 1983, called Operation Everglades. Well, what they didn't understand until later on, I don't know if they ever, or maybe some of them never did figure it out, was because the intelligence was such with the first and second generations, like I said, senators, congressmen, judges. I mean, there was people on everybody's payroll. I mean, at that time, it was easy to pay somebody off. Even a local sheriff department or Marine Patrol, you offer a guy 10 times his annual salary to, go 3 blocks down the road and go to sleep for a couple hours. What the fuck do you think he's going to do? He's going to go take a fucking nap, dude. But, anyways, they come into town, they shut down the road. They got one guy I got a picture. I got to send that to you too. They got one cop out there with a shotgun standing in the middle of the road with one of those orange cones. That was their roadblock because there was only one fucking road out in and out. That's all they needed. All the other 200 other were flooding the fucking two islands, and everybody knew they were coming 2 weeks before they got there because of the intelligence thing. There was nobody there to get, really. So they considered that one like big flop, that we fucked up, like that. So almost a year to the day.
Yeah.
Here they come again.
Yeah.
Operation Everglades 2, they called this one.
Yeah.
Well, the older generations by this time had enough. They knew they weren't going to stop, so they just said, fuck it. So they're sitting out on their porches at 2 a.m, smoking cigarettes, waiting for the show to start, right? And there wound up being, I can send you an article from a magazine. I'm not sure if it's a prevalent magazine in Australia or not, called Life magazine. It's a rather nationally known magazine that's been around for, God, I don't know, forever. They were just one of many reporting agencies that came to the island that morning to be a part of that, to witness that operation. And the article page centerfold picture of the overlay of the 10,000 islands, and the 2-inch or 3-inch lettering at the top of the page across both pages says "Trouble in Everglades City" is what it read. And then underneath it, under the smaller print, it says a small southwest Florida town. They fucked up the population, but they said a small southwest Florida town tarred with drug smuggling, and most of its 600 residents say, "So what?" And it goes on for 15 fucking pages talking about the town of mostly women and children and young men, because the entire male population is going to prison, right? It's just hilarious. There were more reporters on the island reporting about this story than there were people to be arrested. That's just how ridiculous it was.
Wow.
But it was successful this time around. It was pretty much successful by that time. So they had taken the characters that were visible, that they had the ability to surveil or even become suspect or something like that, which wasn't a whole lot of people. I mean, at that time, between both operations and the first and second generations of who they went after, because they had no idea the kids were doing it. I mean, they didn't have any clue to the extent to which any of this was happening until they got to the arraignment of the 5 brothers. And that's a funny one there. They wind up taking these guys in, of course, obviously, federal. They take them to the federal prison. They put them in front of a federal magistrate to hear their arraignments and all this, their pleas and all this stuff. Well, long story short, with that regard, they get down to the 5 brothers who were pretty much doing all the work. They were the ones making these connections. They were the one working all of us. Because they were second generation. First generation was begun by a gentleman, a very wonderful man, just a sweetheart of a guy, and he's a legend in the Everglades, not just for pot hauling, but for his family being one of the founding families of the Everglades in Chokoloskee. His name was Loren Brown. Loren Toch Brown was his middle name. And he was just a legend, and he passed away in '96. And I was very fortunate enough to have known this man, and he began blazing the trail in the early '60s of how to get Colombian marijuana to the United States, and particularly to South Florida. He was one of the first trailblazers that wound up in how to figure out how to do that. Take his crew to Panama, around the corner and up the rivers to find out whoever had the shit, because he was just winging it, man.
Wow. Who
had the grass, the lowland stuff, the redbud, how to pick it, how to dry it, how to package, trial and error. He figured the shit out. Started taking it to Miami for a number of years, and once the 2 corridors through the Caribbean to Miami, which are the windward and the leeward, the Mona and the windward passes, that's between Haiti and Cuba and Dominican Republic and the U.S. Virgin Islands, are the only 2 ways to get out of the Caribbean, unless you come around to the eastern side and come through what we call the Gap, and that was the western edge of Cuba and the eastern side of the Yucatan to get into the Gulf of Mexico. There was only 3 ways to get from the Caribbean into those northern waters. Well, early days coming through the Mona and the Windward passes, those started getting bottlenecked by the cocaine traffickers, the
Yeah.
guys bringing cocaine. So now they're being more watched and they're being more under surveilled, and now by the Navy and the military and all this kind of shit. So that's when Todd says, "Hey, you know what? Fuck this shit.
Yep.
Come over here.
Yeah.
Just come around to the Gap and bring it over to Everglades because once we get it over there, we own the shit. You know."
Ah,
So that's how it wound up going from Miami and coming around to Southwest Florida,
yeah.
and what now Everglades City and at Chokoloskee are known for as the hub of marijuana smuggling of North America.
Wow.
This is quite literally where the majority, if you were smoking weed in the 70s, 80s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, chance 99.9% chance that our guys had their hands on it before. But then, like I said, there's the odd guy doing his thing here and there, and this and that. But we were the only ones that were able to, and this is why it was inspired me. One of the reasons to write the story was that we were able to, because of certain circumstances with regards to the United States government and the, sorry, I'm gonna fix my phone. The being one of the islands within the 10,000 islands and designated as just on the edge of the boundaries of what's called the Everglades National Park,
Yeah.
one of the first national parks here in North America. Now, what they tried to do after they started catching a little bit of this regulation started to change with regards to the size of nets that the commercial fishermen can use, how big the catches can be, what time of year they can catch them, how much they can catch. They started putting all these different kinds of rules and regulations on, making it difficult for us, to do
Yeah.
what we were there, our jobs. I
Yeah.
mean, these people quite literally figured out how to eke out a living on a small little backwards, nowhere in the bumfuck nowhere islands and eke a living out.
Yeah.
You bring somebody from Sydney or Brisbane or Perth or New York or Philadelphia or Chicago, I don't care where the fuck you're from,
Yeah.
drop you off on the road between Everglades and Miami and say, go make a living,
Yeah.
go survive. It's not going to happen. Well, these fuckers did it. They
Yeah.
figured it out, and with no respect or regard for that whatsoever, other than themselves, the United States government starts imposing these restrictions.
Yeah.
Now, where are these people going to fish? You got to fish in the areas that are in the Park Service. You can't, because everything's in there.
Yeah.
Now they want to withdraw our ability to bring our catches through the only two passes there are to get to Everglades or Chokoloskee. They want to make those national parks, so you can't bring your catch through the national park. But
Yeah.
how in the fuck are you going to get to the fish house if you can't go to the? So they started to try that shit, and that's when everybody said, "Fuck you, man."
Yeah.
Then they said, "Okay, let me jump in with you guys and start making some money. These fuckers want to make it difficult."
Yeah.
That's pretty much what precipitated,
Yeah.
everybody wanting to jump in, and that's how the town became the hub. I mean, that's why so many people became involved.
Yeah.
But I had to give you that little bit of backstory to help you understand what prompted Tots to, you know, to begin this. And then when he started with the second generation, which they were kids at that time, was Craig and Dwayne and Daryl and Randall and Cheryl, the five brothers that you'll read about in the book. The youngest of the five brothers, Craig, was dear friends, almost best friends with Tots. Tots brought him on board, said, "Hey, come on, man, make some money." Well,
Wow.
Craig makes a suitcase full of fucking money one time. And he takes it over to his brother's houses and he opens it up and there's all this cash. I mean,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars of cash in this suitcase. And his brothers are like freaking out. They're thinking, they're going to shun him. They don't want nothing to do with him. Get out of my house. We'll throw you out. I literally threw him out because in those days, the common misconception again was that you work with these people. They just shouldn't kill you rather than pay you.
Yeah.
Well, nothing could have been further from the truth because here's Craig, their youngest brother, with a bag full of money. And he says, "Okay, look, if you don't want to do that, just buy your kids some bicycles or something. I don't
Yeah.
care. It's free." So because of their reluctance, and they saw the cash and what was taking place, one right after the other, they started taking on a job and they started working and they became the second generation. They
Wow.
learned and they took things up a notch and they brought their kids when they got older, they brought their kids on, which were the guys I grew up with. That's how that all took place.
Yeah.
So here we are in Miami doing this thing, and I meet these people, and here come these two federal operations that wipe out the Daniels brothers and the people that are putting these jobs together and working the town.
Yeah.
no one had ever seen the people they were dealing with in Miami. So no one knew how to, or even had a thought about, picking up where they left off and continuing.
Yeah.
That wasn't even in anybody's mind until about a month after that second operation. It was probably about a month. I was living in a little town just outside of Naples,
Yeah.
excuse me, called Golden Gate. I got a knock on my door, and there's this guy, George, from the house I was staying at that day. I took that Winnebago over there.
Yeah.
I wound up meeting the guys that nobody ever met. Unbeknownst to me, I
Mhm.
know who the fuck these guys are. They're the ones that own the shit. They were buying it from, they were paying the older generations that were paying us kids to work that shit. So,
Yeah.
holy shit, I fell right into that fucker, man. So, here's George knocking on my door. He's going, Timmy, because there's Timmy. Everybody called me Timmy. He says, Timmy, we got work to do, man. It's backing up. Can you do this? He said. And I didn't give it a second thought. I just blurted it out. Oh, hell yeah, man. Let's go to work. I had all the knowledge that was needed to work it, to take it from South America, to bring it in, to put it in Miami. I knew all of that because I had done
Yeah.
all that over the years. What I had not done was actually gone and bought it. Who do I talk to? First of all, where do I go? What country do I go? Who do I talk to? What do I spend? How much do I pay?
Wow.
All of that shit beyond picking it up from the mothership prior to that, I knew nothing about.
Yeah.
So I literally had to go and investigate through some of the older generation sources that had been in and done their time and got out. How the fuck do I do this? That's how I ultimately inherited these different connections that they had throughout the Caribbean, through Jamaica and Colombian. Their families, they were generational, and so were we. So all I did was pick up with family where family left off. And because, people talk about, cartels. Ooh, you fucking cartel. What fucking cartels? There was no fucking cartel. I mean, there was the the Medellin cartel, but that was cocaine primarily. They didn't give a fuck about weed. And the Cali, they didn't give two shits about, cocaine or weed. They wanted cocaine. That was more profitable because they're making more money on smaller amounts to be moved. When you're moving this much and you're making twice as much as you can make when you're moving this much, really, didn't matter to them, so that's why the weed was such a prevalent thing for us, dude. And the guy that I was working with in Colombia, I'll never mention his name, but he was cousins to the Cali cartel.
Wow.
Of the actually, they weren't part of Cali until they were the Arguella, the Arguella brothers, the Rodriguez Arguella brothers.
Wow.
But anyways, but that was no cartel. I mean, we didn't think about cartels. There was no,
No violence.
what cartel?
Yeah.
Because everything today is obviously is cartel run. So if they're going to go ahead and obviously assume and associate that, but it wasn't that way. It was never like that. I was never afraid of it, because for one thing, growing up as kids and doing what the adults were showing us and telling us to do, if they weren't afraid of it, or they didn't have that look of whatever on their faces, neither did we. They were cool with it. We were cool with it. But we were keying from off of them and their emotional state of being. Go to Colombia for the first time. I got on the private jet that my two Cuban partners and I owned. Off to Colombia I went and met this guy for the first time. You'll read about that. That's a wild fucking trip there, man. But that's just how it all started for me, and that connection got made, and how I wound up just saying, okay, fuck it, let's go, let's start over. So when I went back to Everglades after seeing George that day, the infrastructure was still there.
The
mechanism by which it was all done was still there. They didn't get the rest of the town, particularly even the kids, because they didn't have the right minds got their kids out there unloading pot boats and shit. They were still of that violent mentality. That's why when they finally caught my ass, I had 15 guns stuck against my head. I'm thinking, who the fuck do they think I am, Escobar or some shit? But I had my opportunity. My first time to go to Colombia was when George introduced me to the two guys that you meet in my book, Carlito and Leo.
Yeah.
They're the only two people that I'll ever mention. They were the only two people that I ever wanted to know out of Miami.
Yeah.
You want your shit, weed, wherever you want it from, Jamaica, Central America, Colombia, South America, whatever. You give your money to these guys. You guys give it to me. I'll talk to you. You
Yeah.
talk to your people. I don't want to know them. I don't want to know fucking anybody.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you and then you do your thing with it. But it still worked the same way. You owe me, I keep.
Yeah.
You pay me, you get back, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So my first trip to Colombia was a test, kind of a bit of a test run, 30,000, just over 30,000 pounds, relatively small in my eyes.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a testing for them. So that was I flew down there. It only takes about 5.5 hours or so to fly direct to this little dirt airstrip out in the middle of fucking nowhere land jungle. I mean, you'll read about that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
perfectly well kept airstrip to land a private business Learjet, which was owned by Carlito and Leo and I. And
Wow.
I could fly, because now I'm not flying 1 or 2 times a month, or 3 or 4 times a month to buy. I'm flying down 2 to 3 times a month, and I'm buying 100 to 200,000 pounds at a time, and then sending boats to go get it. And then what I found ultimately to be the problem with all of this, and who would have ever thought that it would become a problem, was the fucking money.
Yeah.
This is what I alluded to earlier. Now we're making the same money, $175 a pound. I'll get you shit from wherever the fuck you want, because I've got a connection. I can do this.
Yeah.
And I put it on your doorstep. But like I said, I don't want to know anybody. I'll pay you, pay me. And then I'll pay you. That sort of thing. So I get the first job, and I'm sent down to Colombia, and I meet the boss man. The boss, I called him for the first time. So you read about this, it's rather funny. So they wanted me to go down there to weigh it, to look at it, to test it, to make sure the shit out of the product I was getting was worthy, was the best I could get at that time. And Colombian Redbud at that time was about the best smoke you could get from coming out of the Caribbean during those days, barring Jamaica and the lion's bread.
Wow.
That was, I mean, every time that was a knock you off your ass. That was top shelf stuff coming out of Jamaica, because those Ethiopian Zion Coptics knew what they were doing, man.
Yeah.
But the next potent type of weed was cannabis coming out of the Colombia. So that's what we were there to get. So I would fly down. The first time I flew down, I took my buddy, was a Cuban friend of mine, with me to translate. We didn't see the boss that first day, because we got there that afternoon. We were put up in an apartment behind the house, which was 4 times bigger than my home here in the United States. And we had our own chef in the kitchen. We had everything we wanted, anything possible that we could have asked for, we got. And the next morning we got up, had breakfast, and we went out to meet the boss man. He come walking through the door, and there's just a little guy, probably 5'6", nothing major about this dude.
Yeah.
Of course, jet black hair pulled back to a ponytail, and he had army fatigue pants on with big pockets, and he had a belted sidearm with him, and he had combat style boots on, but he had a T-shirt, and on the front of the T-shirt was the smiley face. As he's walking through the door, he's speaking Spanish. And this is buddy Rico's, translating, and my guy's translating, and he's all jovial and jolly, and he comes walking through, and he's got this smiley face, and it says, "Have a nice day," like this. And he walks past me to get a cup of tea, and I get a look at the back of his shirt, and there's that same smiley face with that smoking bullet hole in his head, and underneath of it says, "Or else." So on the front it says, have a nice day. On the back it says, "Or else."
Wow. That's
thinking,
awesome.
wow, this guy's a riot. He was just more humorous and funny than he was anything else. I mean, not serious at all, this guy. I mean, this is the kind of players I was dealing with. He was just as funny, as happy-go-lucky as they're
Yeah.
the Easter Bunny was yesterday, for Christ's sake. But So he says, let's go see what you're here to see. And that was the time I mentioned earlier was the only time I was ever handed a gun.
Yep.
He goes out the front door and he's yelling, I'm driving. You know, he grabs a gun and he off the rack and he runs out the front door. Rico, his bar partner, he grabs a gun out the front door. Ruben, my guy, Cuban, he grabs a gun and I said, fuck, and I grabbed one too. And I walk out, we get in the Jeep, we get in the Bronco and we drive. I don't know, it's not even 5 minutes from the house to the mansion, I should say. This thing took up the whole side of this fucking mountain, this house. It was beautiful. And the minute Rico opens this Bronco door, I mean, that smell that I was so familiar with as a kid growing up, that burlap and that marijuana smell, I mean, it smacked me and it punched me in the face like Mike Tyson, man. It's just, if they can make a cologne out of that shit, I would be their best fucking customer. That's for sure. Because I mean, I love that smell. So we get out and we're walking. I'm pushing our way these leathery fucking leaves and shit. And all of a sudden I'm looking at this pile of bales that looks like an Incan ruin. It's like, it's got 10, 12 feet high. It's 20 feet wide, and it goes at least 50, 60 feet back in the jungle. That's how big this pile is. And there's one there, and there's one alongside of it. There's another one there, and there's another one, and there's shit everywhere, man. So this was what was available throughout the region at that time, because he had not just one, but he had several dozen growers from Cartagena to Barranquilla City, even as far away as Santa Marta, which is way west of Cartagena, but growers throughout that entire region growing, and simply because they grow differently.
Yeah.
Some's better than the others, and some of there. So by the packaging, I'm given a 6-foot long pole thereabouts, and on the end of the pole is a piece of pipe cut like a hypodermic at an angle, and I'm sticking these bales and twisting, and I'm pulling some shit out, and we're using the boss's pipe to smoke. And I'm like, damn, that's how many of those you got? You know,
Yeah.
200 or 300. I'm kick them down, and they're kicking. The guys are kicking them off the pile.
Yeah.
And I would literally have a couple cans of paint, and I would spray my mark, particular mark that I had made, on each bale.
Yeah.
And these guys are taking them and weighing them behind me as we're going along. And when I get to the amount that I'm supposed to be there to get, they would yell out, "You're there." We went back to the house and shower up and clean up and get ready, you know, and have dinner and get ready to fly out the next morning. Well, we get back to the house and we're showering. We're sitting in this apartment waiting to go have dinner, and they got bowls of Coke all over the fucking house, man. and the boss man is having this awesome dinner party. So we get cleaned up and we go back in. I'm walking in. I sit down and I've got, you know, being translated back and forth to and have a conversation with the big dog. And there were people in this house that I'd seen throughout the day, you know, where we're weighing and stuff, but there was also a lot of women in the house, you know, and they were there for, you know, any number of reasons, but, you know, just pick one, whatever your mind can think of. So we're talking, and all of a sudden, you know, out of nowhere, here comes this guy that I hadn't seen yet that day. And he leans over and he whispers into the boss's ear. And I'm sitting close enough to have a conversation, and I see the look on this guy's face, and all of a sudden it turns like, gets ashen, like, well, he's one of these. And then he puts his drink down, his cocktail down, and he stands up and he starts walking out of the room. And I'm watching him like this, walk past me. And I almost turn around, and I see him going toward the kitchen. Now he's fast walking. I put my drink down and I turn around and I'm following this fucking guy. So he fast walks a little bit fast. He gets to the kitchen. Now he's fast to walk. He gets to the doors, the French doors in the kitchen, opens up to this big, huge limestone veranda. Down these steps into the backyard, and the perimeter lights for the compound are pointing inward toward the house from the jungle.
Wow.
And he runs through the yard, into the jungle, past the lights, into the darkness, and dives down into the bushes. And by this time, I'm hauling ass, dude. I'm right behind this man. I don't know what's about to take place. All I know is he's running. If this guy's running, my ass is running. You know, that's what I'm saying to myself. So I get in there, and I'm sorry, my phone keeps coming undone.
Nah, that's okay.
I get in there, and I run right past him, about another 20 feet, and I dove like a swimmer off a starter's block, and I fly into these bushes, and I'm sitting there, And I'm waiting for all hell to break loose, man, because I don't know what the fuck's coming right. It seemed like a goddamn hour, but it couldn't have been 30 seconds. And this guy's yelling out the back door something in Spanish. He's going like this. And I can hear this asshole. He just starts laughing like this. And now I'm starting to get a little pissed. I'm getting eaten by mosquitoes the size of fucking horseflies. And here's this guy's laughing. He's walking up to the house. I see his silhouette, from the dark side to the light side. I see him walking back up to the house. I start picking this shit off of me, and I'm sweating through my goddamn clothes. And I get back into the house, into the living room, and I sit down and I get a drink. He's already there. He's already got a drink. He's sitting in his chair. He's sweating like his ass. And he looks over at me and starts laughing. And then everybody else around him starts laughing. And I'm like, I'm looking around. I'm like, what in the fuck? And he says something in Spanish to Rico. And Rico says it to Ruben. Ruben says it to me. And the boss, he's asking me, he goes, where in the hell did you think you were going? He's asking me. I looked him right dead in the fucking eye. And I said, well, when the boss man gets up and runs out of his own fucking house, I'm following his ass, right? The whole room breaks out laughing, But what I didn't know, and they finally figured out after he got back, was the guy that came in and went into his ear. Well, prior to our coming there, and when he does business such as the business we were doing, his wife and children go stay at the in-laws.
Yeah.
Till we're gone. Well, where he was, there's a little bit of a switchback on this mountainside to get to the house. And he's got several spotters in the jungle, always somewhere around the jungle watching the roadways and this and that. Well, he gets word from this guy that your wife's on her way home. There was a car coming up that they thought was his fucking wife.
Oh, man.
Well, it turns out it wasn't his wife at all.
Oh, shit.
That's what the whole joke was about. It was somebody's car looked like his wife's, but they jumped the gun, right? So he was going to leave the fucking house because there's all these horses, this party going on. He doesn't want his wife to know that he had any part of it. He was going to leave Rico and all his buddies in there to take the blame for the party they were having for us, right? Oh, he was somewhere else. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, fuck, we got to get out of here. So the next morning I get in the plane and I take off, and I ultimately I'll send a book, to come and get what I just purchased. But that was my first visit to meet the boss, and since I've been dozens and dozens of times, and we just had the greatest relationship. We could never really. He started picking up some English here and there, and shit he would say to me, and and kiddingly and jokingly and stuff like that. But this is the kind of nature he was. He was of the same nature as I was when it came to humor. He just didn't give a shit about anything, man, because he's making billions of dollars and he's really not having to do anything, But that was my first exposure to the boss, in Colombia. And what ultimately wound up happening was, let me just say this first of all. People are going to ask, and they always do, about what do you do with your money? And people always think that you bury your money. Well, no, you don't. You don't bury money for several reasons. First, I think the most important reason is because it's paper. And money mildews and it rots. I can't tell you, Thomas, how many times I've been paid with $10 bills, and $5 bills were the worst because nobody wanted them fucking things. I mean, because if I've got a $20 million payday, I'm literally counting. We had to stop counting and start weighing because it was taking too long. My paydays were getting up into the 40 million range. And you just can't count, even with 6 federally bank reserve money machines, you can't count $40 million in a couple of days. In different denominations, because I had to take hundreds, 50s, 20s, 10s, 5s. I had to take the whole gambit. I couldn't just take one batch because some poor fucker is going to be left with an 8-car garage full of 5s. He's not going to want them fuckers, Hence the 5s get moldy because they just take this bundle and pay with that. Then this bundle because it never gets open. And second of all, you might wind up forgetting where you put the fucking shit at, once you bury it. I got some stories about some guys that have buried their shit and forgot, lost it. Couldn't find it again.
Man,
But
that'd be the
right up north,
worst.
wasn't it? Yeah, I mean that's well, you know, it to someone such as yourself or someone not involved in what have been involved or seen what I've seen.
Yeah.
To them, it was like, it's simply the case of, oh, I lost my wallet. It had 200,000 in it. Oh well,
Yeah.
one of
Oh
those things.
shit.
Oh well, just go
Yeah.
home and get some more, because it's a pain in the
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah.
And such a pain in the ass, quite literally, that the older generations saw fit to, and so made it very important for us to understand how to spend money, but not have anything to show for it once you've spent it.
Yeah.
There's certain things you can buy and certain things you can't buy
Yeah.
that you would need a receipt for. Say you want to buy a car.
Yeah.
You don't just go back and, I mean, you started doing stupid shit like buying IROC Camaros or Porsches or, stupid shit like that just stuck out, and then you just didn't work anymore. You're done.
Wow.
You've now become a liability and you're no longer an asset. It's just, so what they teach you is in the beginning, and there was only so many ways that they could show you how to spend money and not have anything to show for it. The biggest thing is you could spend up to $10,000. Beyond $10,000, you have to fill out what's required by everyone is what's called a CTR, a cash transaction receipt. That goes right to the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS, and you declare that $10,000 of money having been spent. But if you spend $9,999, you don't need that CTR.
Yeah.
So a lot of the people that I bought trucks and cars and boats and shit from knew me
Yeah.
or knew us guys who we were. And if I wanted a brand new truck, and at those days they weren't that expensive, trucks, you could buy a brand new pickup truck, a Chevy or a Nissan or a Frontier. So, a Dodge or something like that for, maybe 15, 20, 16, 17,000, that was a lot of money on a fucking truck.
Yeah.
Versus today, you're talking $70,000 to buy a fucking pickup, what I mean? But still, you couldn't pay for it all at once. So what they would do is, I go in and take the truck and drive off with it.
Yeah.
I'd give them $9,000, and then tomorrow I'll come in and I'll give you the bail. I'll give them another $9,000. I'll give them 4,000 over what it costs just to give them some money. Here's some money on top of it just for helping out, that sort of thing. I bought that $90,000 chase boat in 9 days.
Wow.
I'd go in with $9,000 over the next 9 days, and or I'd give it all to them, and they would know to deposit $9,000 each day to get by that $10,000 thing. That was one way of doing it.
Well, the
and
9,999.
one of the best. Yeah, just get fucking rid of it. We did that one day when I was coming home from grocery shopping from Naples, because Everglades had a grocery store, but it wasn't, a huge supermarket chain kind of thing. If you want any significant type of grocery shopping, you drive 30 miles into Naples and you come home with it in a cooler. Well, I'm coming home and I passed a Chevy dealership one day, and they got this Corvette sitting in there that's got beautiful ground effects and fat tires and mags, and it's low. It's just, just beautiful looking Corvette. Enough for me to caught my eye, enough for me to crank the. I was driving a Cobra, my Mustang Cobra at that time.
Wow.
I wheeled into that fucking thing, and the first thing I asked him, I said, "Is that for sale? Who owns it?" And he said, "Well, that's the dealership's owner, Bob Taylor. That's his son, Jeffrey. That's his son." I went, "Okay,
yeah, lost you."
And I bought that fucker right then and there. So
yeah,
I'm making arrangements for the cash part up front, and I'm making arrangements for some payment on the backside, with these guys. Well, in the meantime, I'm calling back to Everglades, and I'm thinking, get Teddy or Willie to come up. Now they've got brand new Jeeps. There's a Chevrolet Jeep dealer, and they've got brand new ragtop Jeeps for $8,795, brand new, under $10,000. Light goes on, and I get, as soon as Jimmy answers the phone, I said, "Dude, get Teddy, Willie, and Jimmy and Johnny. There was 6 of them plus me. Get their asses up here, man. They got Jeeps for sale for under $10,000." They said we could take these fuckers out, and we took them out. They all followed it. They all came up in one car.
Yeah.
They all piled into the dealership. We bought 7 Jeeps. All of us bought a Jeep. I bought the Corvette, plus I bought a Jeep, because they all bought one too.
Wow.
We took them from there. We left our cars parked at the dealership. We went from there to a place out south of here called Bad Luck Prairie out in the Everglades. and we had one of the most badass demolition derbies, dude, you've ever seen in your life. We wrecked these, smashed and crashed these, rolled these fucking things for the whole afternoon until we had one left that was
Holy
in a
shit.
decent enough shape to drive back into town and pull it into the park in our cars and drive home. And I wrecked the one I was in, just totaled it because my girlfriend at the time, if you're reading about her, Lori,
Yeah.
blonde bartender, she was just like she didn't have a brain one. I mean, she acted like that. She's
Yeah.
really very clever girl, but in
Yeah.
some areas she's just dumb as a post, right? And she
Yeah.
sees we're in the Jeep and there's a roll bar.
Yeah.
And she's thinking, well, there's a roll bar. You must be able to roll the fucking thing. So she's screaming for like a half hour. She's screaming, roll it, roll it. She's got her hands up on the straps in the window and she's screaming, roll it. I'm tired of hearing this bitch. And all of a sudden I just cranked the fucking wheel like that. And boom, boom, boom. I rolled this thing probably 3 times. I don't know. I lost count. And it's upside down and we're hanging from the straps and she's crying, why did you do that? And I'm spitting sand out of my mouth. I got it up under my eyelids and shit like this. And she's screaming again, Tim, why the hell did you do that? And I looked over and I said, because you fucking told me to. Pushed her seatbelt. She fell out of it. We got that one that was left and we all drove back into town. That's when we went home. Right? But I mean, that was negligible spending. I mean, fuck, $9,000. That's, I mean, we spend more than that in the bar on the weekends.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, that was one of the easiest ways to spend a lot of money at one time. We could literally go to Miami and spend a 4-day weekend. Me and 4 of my buddies. We would take an average of a couple $100,000 a piece in hundreds, because they're the smallest. I mean, a couple $100,000 of hundreds is a stack about like this. You can carry that. What I was carrying for a wallet was a shaving kit with a zipper on. That was my wallet because I had bundles of cash, and so each of us would take a couple $100,000 to Miami on a Friday and spend through Monday evening, sometimes Tuesday, and spend the weekend going from Miami to South Beach, going into the clubs at night and taking the tab on for the club. Find the manager. Most of the managers knew us. We'd take the tab, just say, okay, free drinks for everybody from now until we leave. And I'd give them a pile of cash. Just let me know what it is and we cash out,
Yeah.
and, hold on to this stack in the meantime, because he knew we were serious. They knew where we were from. Most of the guys in Miami's knew us that way. And next thing you know, everybody in the bar is drinking. I don't care what you're drinking, champagne, top shelf. I don't give a fuck what it is. Spend it, drink it, because you're only talking about $3 a drink, even in those days, 2 something or other. It takes a lot of fucking drink. I mean, it takes a lot of drinks to spend
100,000. Yeah.
But when you've got 600 people in one of these giant Miami clubs, we go from one club to the next. We couldn't spend it all to this one. We just go down the street and hop into this club and then throw a wad in there until. And our sole intention over those 4 days, with $1 million between all of us, was to have enough gas money to get home. That was our goal.
Wow. Yeah.
And that sort of spending was easy enough to do. That's what that kind of thing, or go on a vacation somewhere to
cool.
somewhere that you've never been, and just piss money away. I mean, just piss it away. Buy shit for people, and I can't tell you how many cars or trucks I bought for people. And I was going into town to a club one night with a buddy of mine in his pickup truck, and I said, "There's no fucking way I'm showing up in this thing, man. Pull in over here." So we pull into a buddy of mine's dealership, and I said, "Pick out a truck."
Yeah.
He picked out a brand new truck, and we were in there 15 minutes driving off with it because they knew I'd be back. I'm good for it.
Wow.
So we'd show up with a brand new truck, and if I had back the money I gave away, I'd be a multi-millionaire.
Wow.
But I don't care about all of that. It was just what we knew. It was just how we grew up. It was just how we were taught, and the hand we were dealt as 20-year-olds. Who in their right mind, who's what 20-year-old makes $150,000 a week, and when I started taking on the jobs myself, my pay went from that to literally millions a week. I do one job, I'd make $1.5 million, for a couple hours work. or a flight to Colombia and back. Where
Yeah.
the problem was,
Yeah.
Thomas, where the problem really was in getting paid. Like
Yeah.
I started to say earlier, if I'm getting paid 20 million, or it's taken 2 weeks or so to get paid for one particular job, and I may have, when it comes time to get paid for that one, I may have another one ready to get paid for,
Yeah.
or another one, and now I've got $40 million I've got to go count out. Of course, it's been pre-counted when it's being bought in smaller sums, like
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of dollars at a time or whatever, when people are buying it from the Cubans like that. It's been already money counted then. So we know each
Yeah.
bundle is correct,
Yeah.
with the amount it's supposed to be in it. But what we had to figure out from at one point was, I'm counting money for 3 and 4 days at a time now, and I should be in Colombia, or I should be in Jamaica, or I should be helping my crew unload, or some shit like that. I'm getting bogged down counting fucking money. So we decided to quit counting it, start weighing it instead.
Wow. It's a good
And
problem
I
to
was
have.
literally, dude, I was weighing literally thousands of pounds of money, because, $40 million,
Yeah.
I can't even describe to you what $40 million looks like. I
Yeah.
mean, I can tell you that we figured out, as a matter of course, like a lot of people did in those days, is that every dollar bill, um, regardless of the denomination, every United States bill weighs a gram.
Wow.
Well, there's 28 grams in an ounce. There's 16 of those in a pound. It's just math beyond that point.
Yeah.
So all we had to do was pay attention to the denominations of bills that were being thrown onto this basket on the scale.
Wow.
And there were guys literally going from the master bedroom from the guest room. There were hundreds in one room, 50s in one room, 20s in one, 10s in another. 8-car to 10-car garage out back has all the fives in it, because $1 million in five would fill this room behind me. That's how much $1 million in fives takes
Wow.
up.
Holy
Plus,
shit.
now that we're weighing it, on the average, 22 pounds in $100 bills is $1 million, just for instance.
Wow.
Anybody can Google this shit and find out now. I mean, it's just common knowledge. The United States Treasury tells you as much. They tell you what their shit weighs. We just figured it out back then, because when people are doing blow,
Yeah.
they throw that $100 bill or that 20 on the scale, and it would weigh a gram. So that's, oh, it's a gram. That's just how they
Yeah.
figured it out. So 110 pounds in 20s is $1 million.
Wow.
240 pounds of tens is $1 million. It exponentially goes like that.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about $40 million or so, you're literally talking about a couple tons of money, quite literally.
Yeah.
And now what's taking me 4 days to count, it's taking me one afternoon, because bring it out of the bedroom in laundry baskets. And for the first go round, all I had to do was count how many bundles of hundreds, 20s, 10s, or whatever it is that it took the scale to get to 100 pounds. But I only had to count them the one time, because I had to know how many rubber bands I was throwing in there, because the rubber bands weigh a gram each. There's
Yeah.
2 on a bundle. So I have to subtract the amount of the rubber bands in order to get the weight to tell me what the correct weight is. So
Exact
just
number.
over 110 pounds, including the weight of the rubber bands, there's my $1 million. Dump it out. Throw some more in there. Look at the scale. Dump it out. There's 2 million. It's just like that. It was just, I mean, now I'm in and out there in the afternoon. But to be honest with you, and this is surprising to a lot of people, it always took me more time to get the money home than it did to get the 40 tons of weed to Miami.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't take $40 million, dude, is a hefty pile of cash.
Yeah.
I
That's
mean,
nuts,
and like I
man.
said, literally tons of money, tons it weighed. And you just don't put all that in one car and bring it home.
Yeah.
You don't put it all in one truck and bring it home. You never put all your eggs in one fucking basket, dude. You fill a car that can take, a couple, 3 million, 4 million at a time, and you start making trips, with the money. The money was more of a pain in the ass to get home than the pot was to get the money. If you can believe that shit, what a problem they
That's
have, right?
crazy, man.
Plus, I mean, they have so much of it that
Yeah.
I've got I'm throwing it in my attic and shit, trying to figure out where to put this stuff. I'm buying new houses because I had to buy a house straight out of the condo that I was living in because there was so much money stuffed in the air conditioning ducts. The air wasn't coming out anymore. So I had to buy another house so I could have air conditioning. I would throw that shit in the attic. Stack, go to put it. I went to stack one box of that was, I don't know, a couple 100,000, 500,000 or so. I was stacking in boxes up there, and I opened the attic up, and I noticed this little pile right in front of me. It was, I don't know, it was a pretty good sized pile, like this.
Yeah.
All $100 bills chewed up in confetti size
Oh.
pieces by mice. $250,000, $250,000 in $100 bills was just literally chewed to the shit, to the point where, I mean, you're not putting this shit back together with tape, because I mean, these little fuckers were thorough, man. They had the coolest little condominium, and all I could do was laugh. I'm laughing. This fucking shit. I had to call my girlfriend, Lori, come here, look at this. I just grabbed it like this and threw it back in the back of the attic with the rest of the insulation, and threw my boxes in there and told Lori, we got to call a fucking pest control with somebody to get these mice out of here. But that was just, one of 5 houses that I owned at that time. I had several around the Caribbean that